I will go ahead and call to order this meeting of the City of Nashua Planning Board on April 8th, 2021. Linda, could we take the roll, please?
Sure. Mayor Donches, Mike Pedersen, Scott LeClaire, Adam Varley,
Here and alone.
Maggie Harper,
Here and alone.
Alderman Tenza, Alderwoman Schmidt, Dan Hudson,
Here and alone.
Ed Weber,
Here, and my grandkids are in the next room, so they might pop in on their way out.
Bob Bollinger,
Here and alone.
and Larry Hirsch. All right, so we do have a quorum. We have 5 members present.
Great. Thank you, Linda. And before we proceed to the business of the meeting, I am going to read a notice regarding the remote nature of the planning board meeting. So again, this is the April 8th, 2021 planning board meeting. As the individual serving as chair of the planning board tonight, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Sununu as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to executive order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized to meet electronically pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are video conferencing utilizing Zoom. Public access to this meeting is provided via Zoom, and a link to the meeting is contained in the meeting agenda available on the city's website. The meeting can be streamed through the city's website, www.nashua.newhampshire.gov/318-CTV on Nashua's community link. The public may also view this meeting on Comcast Channel 16. We are providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. If anyone has a problem accessing the meeting, please call 603-589-3115 and they will help you connect. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting via the methods mentioned above, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. The chair is in control of the meeting. To the extent practical and advisable, the board will follow the procedures as identified in its bylaws. The applicant will present the applicant's case, followed by questions by the board. We will allow for a rebuttal period as best as possible for persons wishing to speak in favor or with questions or opposition before the board deliberates and determines an outcome. Applicants, the representatives, and individuals required to appear before the planning board are appearing remotely and are not required to be physically present. Applicants, the representatives, and individuals required to appear before the planning board may contact the planning department to arrange an alternative means of real-time participation if you are unable to use Zoom. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting should be done by roll call vote. Planning board meetings will be held electronically until it has been deemed safe to conduct more typical meetings at City Hall. The planning board, the planning department, and city staff thanks you for your understanding and patience during this difficult time. Okay. Next up on the agenda, we have approval of the meeting minutes of both the March 4th, 2021 and March 18th, 2021 meetings. So I guess I would take a motion as to the March 4th minutes first, or if anyone has any comments on those minutes, please let me know. Mr. Bollinger?
Oh, Mr. Varley, I'm sorry. I saw Ms. Harper's hand go up first, so I'll defer. Thank you.
Ms. Harper?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 4th, 2021 as written.
Great, thank you. And as to that motion to approve the March 4th minutes, is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, seconded by Mr. Bollinger. Is there any further discussion? Okay, Linda, could we take a roll call on that motion?
Adam Varley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Bollinger.
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes 5-0.
Then, as to the March 18th minutes, were there any questions or comments, or if not, would someone like to make a motion as to acceptance? Ms. Harper?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 18th, 2021 meeting as written.
Thank you. And is there a second as to that motion to approve the March 18th minutes?
Second?
Seconded by Mr. Ballinger. Linda, can we get a roll call vote again, please?
Adam Barley,
Yes?
Maggie Harper,
Yes,
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
yes,
Bob Ballinger,
Yes.
and that motion passes 5-0.
Next up on the agenda, we have communications. Linda, I think we have a few items.
Yes. So shortly, a little while ago, Matt Sullivan sent out an email from Tom Zajac, dated today. And I'll just go ahead and read it for the record. On behalf of our clients, we respectfully request to continue both the 537 Amherst Street and 115 Concord Street site plan applications currently scheduled to be heard during tonight's planning board meeting until the May 6th meeting. So if anybody's here for those two projects, they won't be heard until May 6th. And also, you should have received by email, we have an email from a Donald Dillaby regarding 21 Palisade Drive and the drainage going there. Then we got some correspondence regarding 36 Fifield. We have an email from Wayne Husband asking for a contribution, and that is dated April 5th. We have an email from Jim Petropoulos from HSI dated April 5th addressing engineering comments. We also received regarding 36 Fifield Street, an updated plan set. Then we have an email dated April 6th from the Fire Marshal's office regarding the Sky Meadow Cart Barn addition. We also have engineering comments that were sent out on April 2nd regarding the Sky Meadow Cart Barn addition. We received some correspondence regarding 115 Concord Street, but that will not be heard until May 6th. And then finally, we had sent out some minutes for the March 4th planning board meeting that were already approved. So that's all that I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Next up, we have the report of committee and liaison. Ed, did you have anything to report?
yes. The HDC had one applicant and it was passed. That was it.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now we will proceed to the business of the meeting. Old business conditional special use permits, none. Old business subdivision plans, none. Old business site plans, none. New business conditional special use permits, none. New business subdivision plans. New business A21-0042, David J. and Sharon Cody, application acceptance of proposed 2-lot subdivision. This property is located at 21 Palisade Drive, Sheet B, Lot 324. This is zoned R9 suburban residence and located in Ward 9. As to this new business item, I don't know if anyone on the board has had an opportunity to review and would be willing to make a motion that this application is complete and ready for the board to take jurisdiction. Ms. Harper?
yes, I would like to make a motion that this application is complete and that the board should proceed.
Thank you. So the motion by Ms. Harper is that the application is complete and the board should take jurisdiction. Is there a second to that motion?
Second?
Second by Mr. Ballinger. Is there any further discussion? Linda, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you. Do we have someone from the applicant that's here this evening to present?
Yes, hello. Is it possible to be able to share my screen, please?
Yes, Linda, I don't know if it's that's already permitted or. I think
You should be able to.
Okay, perfect. Here we go. All right, can everyone see this?
yes.
Okay, great. So, hello everyone. I'm Pete Madsen. I'm a project engineer at Keach Nordstrom Associates in Bedford, New Hampshire. I'm joined by our president, Tony Basso, and we will be representing the owner and applicant, David and Sharon Cody, for the subdivision of their property at 21 Palisade Drive. So the parcel is referenced as map B, lot 324 in the suburban residence zoning district. It lies at the corner of Shady Lane and Palisade Drive. The existing lot is a little bit over half an acre and currently houses an existing 1.5-story single-family home. The project proposes to subdivide the existing lot to create 2 new lots referred to as lots 324 right here and lot 3201 down here. The applicant intends to relocate the existing house to the newly created lot 3201 and construct a new single-family home kind of where this existing house is on lot 324. As you can see, there's a existing 20-foot drainage easement for the city of Nashua, which runs parallel to the southeast lot line. The applicant does not intend to disturb anything within this. We are also proposing a 10-foot utility easement here to run water service to lot 3201 due to the lack of water located within the street on Palisade Drive. Additionally, we're going to propose to install a utility pole at the corner of the 2 lots and run overhead utilities from this pole farther down on Palisade Drive. We're asking for 3 waivers from the Nashua Land Use Code. From the first waiver is from section 190-221B9 to waive the need to show existing features within 1,000 feet of the subdivision boundaries. The entirety of this parcel has been surveyed, as well as a number of important features in the immediate project area. The existing features outside of what is shown on the plans were not located, as they really have no bearing to the overall project. The second waiver that we're requesting is from section 190-221A to allow installation of overhead utilities where underground is required. So this waiver is requested due to overall constructability concerns we have in the area based on the high concentration of public utilities that run down Palisade Drive. This installing underground utilities would force the applicant to run individual lot services parallel to the road, and this in turn would lead to additional easements along the property. The final waiver that we're requesting is from section 192.12, which is to allow a sidewalk contribution fee in lieu of constructing a sidewalk along both Palisade Drive and Shady Lane. The applicant is offering to contribute a fee of $7,760, which is based on the total frontage of Palisade Drive minus the width of the 2 18-foot driveways multiplied by $50 per linear foot. It's important to note here that both streets are actually part of the NHDOT Safe Route to School program, which encourages and enables elementary and middle school children to safely walk and ride bicycles between home and school. This is demarcated here, this single white line and the single white line here. It's basically an 8-foot wide swath on one side of each road that's demarcated by this single white line, and it essentially acts as a sidewalk. The only state permit that is required for this project is a shoreland permit, and this is just based on the site's proximity to Salmon Brook down here. This permit has been filed and we're expecting approval within the next couple of weeks. As part of this submittal, we have included a lot development plan shown here. This shows a possible scenario for the development of these 2 lots. We show potential driveway location, house location, landscaping, fencing, and as well as any drainage improvements and utility connections. We have received engineering comments from DPW. We have addressed those. We'll continue to work with DPW through the process if any additional concerns arise. And actually, I would like to point out, just so it's correct, in the staff report here, there were just a few minor corrections. The total site area listed right here actually should be 0.529 acres instead of the 0.216. And this down here in the first paragraph, lot B3201 right here, second lot B3201 will contain 9,399 square feet. So don't mean to be nitpicky, just want to make sure we get that correct. So otherwise, we take no exceptions to this report. Everything looks good. And with that being said, I'd like to open it up for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I noticed in our packets, there were questions from the abutters about drainage and impact on abutting property. So
Sure.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit in more detail about the stormwater management improvements.
Absolutely. So what we've done here is, in this plan, we have developed a little depression here, an infiltration depression, as well as stone drip edges, excuse me, around the two homes to deal with any infiltration. We've looked at offsite flows and we've mitigated those. We meet pre to post in both points of analysis, which I can show you right here. We have this lot line as a point of analysis, and this the road, which is where most of the drainage goes to either A or B. We decrease or do not increase in either of these scenarios. And like I said, we have this infiltration system here and a drip edge here, so there's not a lot of water leaving the property.
Okay. That's it for me for now. I'll open it up to other members of the board for questions.
Weber?
Mr. Weber, go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you. The drainage, is the engineer going to submit as-built drawings at the, during, actually how the contractor has been, completed this, drainage system so that, when it's completed, it will be put to the engineering department?
Yeah, Ed, I think if you look at,
I don't have any plans.
okay, well, so there's condition number 14 in the staff report, I think addresses that issue.
Great, that's what I needed.
Yeah.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Bollinger?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to verify, this is R9 zoning, and both the subdivision complies with basically no variance or relief is required for lot size. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Madsen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions from the board members? I can't see everyone, so if you do have a question, just jump right in there. Okay,
Hudson?
go ahead, Mr. Hudson.
I in the discussion, I didn't recall if it was mentioned, but they are offering a contribution in lieu of sidewalk construction.
Yes, that is correct. We're offering $7,760, I believe.
Yeah, that's what we have in the report, and,
Yep.
and Mr. Maz, I think as you indicated, that's the frontage along Palisade Drive.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions from the board at this time, I will go ahead and open it up to the public. And Mr. Madsen, if you wouldn't mind just, if you would stop sharing your screen just for a few minutes, just because it's easier for me then to see.
Absolutely.
So if there is anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition or concern or has a question, please just unmute Please identify yourself, name and address for the record, and then and please go ahead. And are you seeing any hands up or anyone looking like they want to speak?
I'm looking at the list of participants and I do not see anybody with their hand raised.
Okay.
Hello?
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 Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good. This is Abby Bird. I would be number 4 Shady Lane, which would be the house further down from the new house that's being constructed. And my question is, I didn't realize you were thinking about putting in sidewalks on this side. That's kind of a shock. I didn't hear about that. But the long and the short is we have a water problem right now that the city is dropping the water on us. And I'm wondering if the Cody's driveway is going to be higher. There's one drain and one drain only, which is on the corner of Shady Lane and Palisade. And if you looked at the layout of the land, nothing seems to drain down there. It all just seems to come in our yards. And I was wondering, could the city entertain the possibility of putting a drain in the street right between? I mean, I have a fence there. I'm assuming, and I'm going to ask because David told me he thought that's not being touched. Right about where that fence would be, where the split rail fence was, if there was any way you could look into that, because when we have really, really bad snowstorms and it melts, and when we have really bad rain, we end up with huge puddles. It's not just us across the street too, but it all seems to run in our yards, and it would be fine except for the fact that we have the drain down there, but it's not working for the rest of the street. It only works for right around the corner there itself. Could that be entered in to at least be looked into, hopefully?
Sure. Well, I can certainly. We've got several representatives from the city on here tonight, so I can certainly. And so they've heard your comment there. I mean that it goes beyond the scope of this particular application, and it's not something that the applicant obviously can address.
Okay.
But I will just have the applicant, speak to the drainage issue again.
They would be impacted also when the rains come, unless their driveway is higher than the street considerably. So they'll end up with the same problem. They'll end up with the city water on their front lawn, unless there's I don't know about any sidewalk. If there's a sidewalk in there, then I don't know where you go with that. But anyway, that was one of 2 questions. The other is, are we going to be impacting the tree line when we move the original house a lot, or are they keeping most of them? I believe I heard that they were keeping most of them. Is that correct?
So I will put that question to the applicant and just have them clarify that.
Okay.
And then I did just want to clarify as well that the applicant is actually asking for a waiver not to construct sidewalks. So the intent is that there would not be a sidewalk built here.
Oh, good. Okay. And that would be my question. And also with the drainage, which is in my backyard also, if they're going to be changing anything out there, which would require taking down more of the forest in the back. I am concerned because when we first moved here, there was, you couldn't even see the water. There was that many trees. Now you can see all the houses' lights on at night across the way. So people are taking tree upon tree down. And I'm wondering about if that's going to continue.
Okay. Well, again, we will ask the applicant just to clarify what their intentions are in terms of removing trees.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience who had questions, concerns, other views that they wanted to express regarding the project?
Yes.
Go ahead. If you could just state your name and address for the record, please.
Donald Dillaby, 27 Palisade Drive on the other butter on the other side. Most of my questions and concerns are contained within the email that I sent to the planning board yesterday afternoon. And it's in regard to the emergency spillway that I see shown on the plan, and as how it might affect my property, since the topography there indicates that it is higher than my backyard.
Okay, again, and certainly I will put that question to the applicant. And were there other specific concerns that you wanted to identify that we can pass on? Or is it essentially the drainage issue?
Basically, it concerns drainage, and that was most of my issues. It's in the, as I said, they're in the email that I sent yesterday.
Understood. Yeah, and we did see your email in the package, and that's why in part why I'd asked the applicant to address those drainage issues. So we'll ask the applicant to focus specifically on that issue you've raised and address that.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience with questions, concerns, wanting to speak regarding the plan? Okay, seeing none, I will turn back to the applicant to give them the chance to address the questions and concerns that were raised. Mr. Madsen, I think we've got really sort of two related questions on drainage, and in particular, Mr. Dilby's question about the emergency spillway and the difference in grade between his property and this property. And then Ms. Bird's question regarding the intentions in terms of removing trees.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Varley. Thank you both for your questions, actually. So I'm going to address Abby's question first. Actually, do you think it'd be possible to share my screen again?
Yes, please go ahead and share your screen.
Great. Okay. So this tree line right here, this is the existing tree line in the subdivision plan. This is the proposed tree line here. So really not impacting that tree line very much, especially to Abby's property back here. I mean, there really should be very little change. I hope that answers your question. It's very minor impact.
Yeah, I'm on the phone, not on the computer, so
apologies.
That's not a help. In other words, are they straightening it out across there and taking out the rest of the trees across in there? Or are they digging in towards Don's property, Mr. Dillaby's?
Yeah, there'll be a small amount of clearing along Donald's property, just not very close, but just to fit the house in the location that it needs to go. And there, like I said, you have a nice buffer back there that really won't be touched. I mean, there's like a 30-foot buffer on both properties here that will remain wooded.
Okay, all right. And my other question was the drain, help with getting a drain out front here, because they are going to be impacted eventually unless their driveway sits way above my property. Then we got a problem that way too.
Right. So the driveway is not sitting up. I mean, this is like Mr. Varley said, this is really a question for the city. I mean, we've done what we can to mitigate stormwater on our property here, but it's just really out of our scope.
Right. Well, I've already talked to them, and they're going to come down. And so I'll talk with the Codys about that day, then maybe they can talk with them too, simply because they will be getting the city's water. And sure. We got to figure out how to do that, where we can put it and that kind of stuff. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. And to answer Mr. Dillaby's question about the emergency outlet there, basically this thing is designed to infiltrate almost all runoff in the 25-year storm. Though that outlet weir does not control very much runoff. There's really nothing coming out of there. It's very low flows, and it'll be going out when it does drain. It'll be going into a wooded area and dispersing along the trees there. So there really shouldn't be any impacts to your property based on any flow coming out of here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Madsen. And Mr. Dilby, did that answer your question? Did that address your concern?
It did.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions of the applicant from the board? Okay. Seeing none, I will go ahead and close the public hearing and move into the public meeting to deliberate the application. It seems like a fairly straightforward, two lot subdivision, a number of which we've seen over the last few years. The two issues that did come up, drainage seems to be adequately addressed on the site. And in particular, it seems like the applicant was able to address Mr. Dilby's concern, as well as addressing Ms. Bird's concern regarding buffering with the tree line. Were there other questions from the board, other issues that anyone wants to raise in terms of the application? Ms. Harper?
I just had a question for staff, actually.
Sure.
Would we need to add a mention or recording, a part to the recording that the shoreland permit be submitted to the building department? Do you think that's applicable?
Should
that be
a state permit?
Okay.
We'll receive it anyways. So
you will. Okay, great.
Okay.
The only other thing I would add is that we do have the sidewalk waiver, and as the staff report notes, the applicant is calculating the contribution based on just the frontage on Palisade and not including Shady Lane. And I would say we haven't always been consistent with every plan, but I think certainly in more recent times, I think we have generally used that metric for calculating the sidewalk contributions using just the main frontage and not accounting for the second street where you have these corner lots. So I think that is consistent with how we've addressed that in the past. Any other comments, questions from the board? Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Varley. Yes, and again, I don't necessarily expect one applicant to address it. My general concern with the area, and if there's a way to possibly mitigate this in the future, it's not entirely clear why there's a crosswalk there. There's no connectivity. I understand Shady Lane is a relatively low volume road, but with an elementary school further down the road, I'm a little surprised that the state allowed that to be a safe routes to school designated corridor without some connectivity with regard to sidewalk. And I understand that this is a relatively minor subdivision, but I would just maybe put that kernel out there as food for thought. At some point, the city may want to look at some of the sidewalk connectivity, particularly with regard to walking students. And again, I don't expect this applicant to necessarily address that. So I don't think I would disagree with your overall assessment with regard to frontage only accounting for one side, but it may want to be something that staff and engineering look at in the future with regard to connectivity. So thank you, Mr. Varley.
Thank you, Mr. Bollinger. Any other comments or questions from the board? And if not, I'd certainly be happy to take a motion on the application. Ms. Harper? Oh, Ms. Harper, you're on mute there.
All right, I thought I hit the button. I'd like to make a motion regarding new business project A21-0042 subdivision plan. Owners David J. and Sharon Cody, located at 21 Palisade Drive. And the planning board finds that the plan does meet the requirements outlined in the subdivision NRO 190-138G with 3 waivers. The first, the request for a waiver of 190-282B9, which requires physical features on site and within 1,000 feet, is granted, finding that the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Waiver request number 2, 190-212A1, which requires that a sidewalk be located on at least one side of the street, is granted, finding that the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. The applicant has agreed to make a contribution in the amount of $7,760 in lieu of sidewalk construction pursuant to 190-212D2, payment to be made prior to recording the plan. The final waiver request of 190-221A, which requires utilities on site to be underground, is granted, finding that the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. And 4 through 14 as written.
Great, thank you, Ms. Harper. And with that motion to approve with the stipulations indicated by Ms. Harper, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, Linda, could we have a roll call, please?
Adam Farley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
And that motion passes 5-0.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Next up, we have new business subdivision plan, case number A21-0048. Margaret R. Whitney Estate owner, David Russell applicant. Application and acceptance of proposed 11-lot subdivision. Application and acceptance of property is located at 36 Fifield Street, Sheet 3, Lot 19. This is zoned suburban residence and is located in Ward 7. Has anyone from the board had an opportunity to review the application and would be willing to make a motion that this application is complete and ready for the board to accept jurisdiction?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Mr. Ballinger. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Harper. Any further discussion? We have a roll call, please.
Adam Farley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
And that motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Is there someone here from the applicant that's presenting on the plan tonight?
Absolutely. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Jim Petropoulos. I'm a civil engineer with Hayner Swanson, doing business at 3 Congress Street in Nashua, New Hampshire, tonight representing David Russell, land developer. With me is attorney Jerry Prunier, and also Bob Pace with Legacy Builders, the intended builder for this project. And as you just read into the record, we're seeking approval for a 1-lot into 11 lots subdivision on parcel located at 36 Fifield Street in Nashua. My job, as always, is to present the facts of the subdivision and answer any questions that the board or the public may have. I'm going to call up my drawings here. Can everybody see that, Mr. Chair?
Not yet, and maybe it's just on its way.
How about now?
No, I'm still not seeing it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on a second. There we go. How about now?
Now we've got it.
I apologize for that.
No problem.
So the subject site is 3.87 acres in size, and it's zoned in the R9 urban residence zone. The site is abutted by single-family homes to the north and to the east, by a single-family residence to the south, and of course, Fifield Street to the west. And overall, Mr. Chairman, as you can see on the aerial, this part of Nashua contains single-family homes in both the R9 and RA zoning districts. The property itself enjoys 250 feet of frontage on Fifield Street, as well as frontage on a hammerhead-type cul-de-sac at the end of Summit Street. There does exist a single-family home on the property that's existed for many years. And as you can see, the remaining part of the lot is currently wooded. There's a small wetland area that exists in the very southeast corner of the site, and it's really part of a larger wetland complex off our property. Number of test pits were performed on the site. Gravelly sandy soils, ledge was encountered at depths between 5 and 8 feet. If anyone is familiar with the property, there is some topographic relief in the front, really a moderate sloping land that moves from south to north, and the property gets a little bit flatter as you work into the back of the property. The necessary utilities to service the development are located in the adjacent streets. Okay. So what's being proposed is a subdivision, as I said, 1 lot into 11 lots for single-family residential homes in accordance with the R9 zoning district. The project will include fee simple lots and public roads. The lot sizes range from a minimum lot size of 9,046 square feet to the largest lot, which is 24,498 square feet. The proposed builder intends to build homes, if you're interested, in about the 2,000 square foot range. Traditional New England architecture, colonials, pitched roof, certainly consistent with the neighborhood. The existing home on the property, I just recently learned, rather than being demolished, will be picked up and moved to one of the lots within the subdivision. The road will include a 500-foot cul-de-sac from Fifield Street here. This road is to be known as Saddleback Drive. And as you can see on the plan, we're also proposing a future street stub to this property to the south. And that's part of an agreement with this property owner. If I go back to the aerial, you'll see this 8-acre property is fairly undeveloped with just a single-family home. We feel there's a strong likelihood it will be developed at some point in the future. And again, as part of an arrangement with this property owner, they're proposing to build a stub to that property. One point I would like to bring up is that even though this property does have some unique frontage to Summit Street, there is no proposal to access Summit Street. All 11 lots will gain their frontage and access off of Saddleback Drive. The utilities needed to service the development will all be located in Saddleback: sewer, water, gas, telephone, and electric. And those within the project will be underground utilities. New street lighting is proposed for the public street in accordance with the city's regulations. A town and country style residential fixture, not a very tall commercial fixture. And it will be LED type lighting for the street. Sidewalk is proposed along the frontage of Fifield Street and within the subdivision. With regard to stormwater, and here's a graphic showing building boxes of the proposed 11 lots. Our approach for stormwater was to capture the runoff from the roadways and driveways and pipe it into a surface stormwater type treatment practice, a detention basin in this location here. That basin will contain a plunge pool and storage to filter out and settle out suspended solids and stormwater. This stormwater is generally working towards these two backyards. We didn't think it was appropriate to continue to discharge from this basin back here. So we thought it would be more responsible to have that piped outlet come down and then run down Summit Street and connect into the city system here. Several lots within the project will also contain the infiltration units you typically see in single-family subdivisions. So overall, with regard to stormwater, we've provided, qualitative treatment of the street runoff here in this location. And then by controlling the outlet, the peak rates of runoff leaving the site are less than and equal to the pre-development rates for the larger storm events. Now, this stormwater basin, even though the street is public, this stormwater basin will not be maintained by the city of Nashua. It will be maintained either by a homeowners association for these 11 lots or potentially by the owners of these 2 lots. Those details have yet to be finalized by the project team. With regard to traffic, a letter report was prepared as part of our application. The project falls well beneath the thresholds for needing further study. We do understand City Engineer Wayne Husband, traffic engineer, has requested a voluntary contribution for traffic improvements to the Main Street corridor, which is located to the west. The amount is $2,200, and our client has agreed to do that. One waiver for this subdivision, Mr. Chairman, has been requested. NLU section 190-282 requires applicants to show all features within 1,000 feet of the subject site. We're asking relief from this requirement, and I go into great detail in my letter. I won't read the letter, but the interpretation of the code is that you need to show all features within 1,000 feet of this property. That's 72 acres of detailed survey for a 3-point-acre lot. We think it's unreasonable to request that for, a 3-point-acre parcel, a fairly small subdivision. There is really no reasonable way to meet that requirement, and granting the waiver will not harm any public or private rights by the land use code. So in summary, Mr. Chairman, we believe our application is complete. It conforms to the Nashua subdivision regulations. The recommended conditions in the staff report are acceptable to our client, with the exception of number 5, which I'll touch upon briefly. Condition number 5 states prior to recording of the plan, the existing house shall be removed. I think I miscommunicated that on the plans that the house was to be removed. I didn't know it at the time that it was going to be relocated to one of the future lots. So I would suggest that condition could be deleted. We have received engineering comments. I think they're fair. I think that we have narrowed the list down, and I think the remaining items are certainly items that we can address as part of that condition. And with that, we respectfully seek your approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the board or the public may have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Petropoulos. Just one quick question going back to that, the relocation of the house, would it be appropriate to just modify that stipulation to say that the house would be relocated instead of removed?
Well, if the house is going to be relocated, we can put that on the drawings, but I think the way the condition reads is prior to the plan being signed. I think that's a little early for us, We'd have to go move it before the plan gets signed. I would say, prior to something else, that the house is to be removed, or a condition that the plan reflects that the house is to be moved to a proposed lot on the site.
Okay. All right, and I can ask staff what their preference is in terms of how we structure that. You mentioned that with the drainage improvements, you're anticipating that there would be, either a no increase in impact or a net decrease. As it relates to the drainage feature that would drain out onto Summit Street as opposed to the northern lots there, are you anticipating that that's going to materially change the drainage flow on Summit Street, or are you still anticipating that's going to be a relatively modest impact there as well.
Yeah, so a little bit about drainage. You know, obviously in a wooded site, when you develop a property with tree clearing and roads and pavement, you're not as much as that water is working its way vertically through the soil. It's skimming off the property at a greater rate. And so what we're doing is collecting that water here. And the way really a stormwater practice like this works is we purposely undersize a pipe so that that water can't get through at a rapid rate, and it builds itself up and then it lets itself out at a slower rate. And we can control that rate such that it's the same rate that's kind of getting off the land right now as it's working to the north. So we think by controlling it in a pipe network rather than discharging it directly onto our neighbor's property is much more responsible. Clearly, there's added cost. You know, Summit Street's a challenging little street. There's already some existing utilities in there, so it's delicate construction. But there will not be an increase of flow. No. So we think it's a good solution. In working with DPW, they were concerned about maintenance and such, and so there's a little bit of detail that needs to be worked out, the mechanics of that. But if built properly and functioning properly, you know, with regular maintenance, it should function quite adequately for many years.
Great, thank you. Other questions from members of the board for the applicant?
Yes.
Mr. Ballinger?
Mr. Varley, thank you, Mr. Varley. Mr. Petropoulos, could you talk a little bit about, if it came up in any of your research, some of the paper street configurations in that area? I guess there's obviously one that directly affects you, but are those officially recorded as public right-of-ways, or is there any determination as to true ownership of those identified paper streets?
Sure. So this is an older part of Nashua. I think the original subdivision may date back 100 years. There were a number of paper streets located throughout this property. Those paper streets were never accepted and they were never constructed. Our testimony here this evening is that no public rights, city rights exist to any of the paper streets. Now, private rights did exist on a number of the paper streets in the project. The current property owner has secured releases of those private rights, including his rights to those private streets. And so we sit here today presenting a clean property here, okay, that has no public rights for streets, and that the private lots have been privately released. Now, they're in the process of getting those. I don't think, Mr. Ballinger, they've all been recorded, but I think as a condition of approval that those documents be recorded, you know, prior to the recording of this plan is absolutely fair. That's fine.
Thank you.
Any further questions from members of the board? Okay.
Mr. Chen?
Ms. Harper?
Just a quick question, Mr. Petropoulos, you had mentioned that there could possibly be an HOA to maintain the stormwater management system. But I was also curious about the cul-de-sac itself, because it kind of looks like there might be a landscaped area there on the public street. So would that be part of that, the HOA, or whatever the agreement you're looking to do there?
Yes, it would. In fact, this little note right here on our plan speaks to that cul-de-sac. Inside that cul-de-sac, certainly the city doesn't want to maintain it. Actually, I think the way the code reads is for cul-de-sacs that the interiors be maintained by the lots that front on the cul-de-sac. And so these two lots here, 140 and 141, will maintain the interior of the cul-de-sac, and that will be in the deeds for those two lots.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the board? All right. Being none at this time, I would open it up to members of the public who are in the audience tonight. If you have questions, concerns, comments about the plan, please go ahead and unmute and just identify your name and address for the record, and just go ahead and let us know you'd like to speak up. I see Karen. Please go ahead and unmute and.
Hi there, I'm Karen Gleason. I live at 1 Crestview Terrace. On the map that was being shown, I'm in lot, I currently live in lot 92, which would abut lot 41 that he's making. So I'm over here at on the corner of Crestview Terrace in Wentworth. And my house would abut 141. Yes, that's my property. And I just had a question to the planner, basically about as far, like, based on my property and where lot 141 would be. We have a big tree line behind us. Do you know how far back or how close to our property the new residence would be?
Yeah, and we once we've gotten everyone's comments and questions, we'll put all of those questions, including that one, to the applicant.
Thank you.
Did you have any other questions or concerns?
That's all.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I see a couple of hands up. I'm not sure in which order they came, but I'll start with Mr. Marion, and then
Wait for a hand up.
Had to find the mute button. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Marion. My address is 37 Fifield Street, which would be directly across the proposed Saddleback Drive.
Gonna hold it.
I do not know how to phrase these, but I'm curious if the Mr. I apologize for messing up the name, Mr. Petropoulos. The traffic assessment, to my understanding, that was done for, I presume, was for Fifield Street. When was that traffic assessment taken? I guess.
again, we'll collect all of the questions and present those to the applicant. So just so if you have additional questions, please just fire away.
Thank you.
132.
I'm also seeing within the plans that there is a proposed future road that would, in essence, egress to the current Whitney property. I don't know if that's eventually planned to egress to Fifield Street as well. That may not be necessarily relevant to the current issue, but I did have concerns about that. Third question with regards to sidewalk installation. To my understanding, if I'm following this properly, the sidewalks that are being created are within the Saddleback Drive, but also on the eastern side of Fifield Street, up against the intended property and development. Is there an extension of those sidewalks? Are they planning to go all the way up Fifield? Are they being extended to myself and the other property across? Curious on the status of that. And I'm not familiar with terminology, so I wanted to inquire. To my understanding, the Saddleback Drive was going to be considered private property, and I'm not sure I understand clarification on that, so I apologize for my ignorance. But I was trying to determine, is this going to be strictly forbidden from folks within the neighborhood, or is this going to be considered applicable roads to be able to traverse, walking, et cetera, et cetera. My bigger concern was the traffic assessment, and that's the primary one that I'm concerned about.
Okay, great, thank you. Next up, I have Cecile Carlton. If you want to go ahead and unmute.
Hi, my name is Cecile Carlton. I live at 3 Wentworth Street, and my property abuts. It's going to be part of the stormwater management system. And so I would like a little bit more detailed information about how that's going to be constructed and the pipe and how that will, what will be the proximity to our property in the back. And then what happens if we have issues that something malfunctions with that stormwater management system? Who do we contact and how do we get things addressed if that happens?
Great. Did you have any other questions, comments, concerns?
No, that was basically it. Because I know the question came up about the paper streets, and I understand that we did receive a letter from the city at the time that gave us back the distance on that street to our property. So that is recorded in our deeds already. But I know that there were easements signed, and I haven't seen the adjusted information on the property piece at this point either. So that's basically it. And I think if I had more information about the water management system, I might feel a little more comfortable.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, and then I have a hand up from Alan. Alan, if you want to go ahead and state your name and address, you can please go ahead and give us your questions and comments.
Hi, it's actually Patricia Whitney. Alan is with me as well. We are at 9 Wentworth Street, which is lot 132 on the map. And our concern is our entire lot, and I believe into 141 is all ledge. And I have lived in a development before where it was all ledge, and in the process of doing the construction for the homes, ended up cracking our basement. And I just don't really know how this is supposed to work, and if there are any, if there's anything that would be addressed for that. I hope that question is clear.
Yep.
Anything to add?
No, you'll.
That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Petropoulos, if you wouldn't mind just taking down your screen for a moment, just so I can see if there's anyone else. Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Linda, do you see any other hands raised? No. Is there anyone else in the audience that hasn't had an opportunity to speak that would like to speak on this plan?
This is Celeste Cadiz. I'm at 1 Summit Street, lot 117, which would abut 144. And I have the same question as Karen with regards to how many trees are going to be cleared, and if there are, I mean, there's already quite a lot of trees being tagged. So I'd like to know more about sort of what efforts will go into landscaping. And I'm also interested in more information on the drainage and as well as, any effects that might take place because of the changes for accommodating more runoff water. And that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else in the audience with questions, comments, concerns that we didn't get to? Okay, I'm not, oh, wait, sorry. I see Scott's iPhone with a hand raised.
Hi, my name is Scott LaRock. I'm at 3 Crestview Terrace. So I believe I'm abutting lot 140. And I have the same questions that Karen had brought up as far as clearing back on the trees. And I'm also curious to find out how close the foundations are going to be to my property line. Because I believe that, and I think Mrs. Carlson had brought it up, that wasn't there, there was a certain amount of distance, and that was asked to be changed, and we never saw any information on that. That's all I had.
Thank you.
I do have one more question on that.
Did you? Oh.
For the distance.
Sorry, could you just so we can keep track, could you just identify yourself again?
I'm sorry, this is Patricia Whitney. We're at 9 Wentworth.
Great, thank you.
And if you look at lot 141 and the other one that's on the cul-de-sac, it's unclear, and we have had the same issue with at City Hall defining the boundary lines and what is considered a backyard and what is considered.
Yeah, we're just on a Zoom call,
sideline.
that's all. Thank you very much.
If you look at the plan, the house is proposed diagonally on the lot. So it's unclear, and it's unclear when we talk to the planning board, whether those, because the back of their lot comes to a point, whether those are two side lines and there is no back line, or whether they're both back lines and there are no sidelines on that lot, which matters for the setbacks.
Right, so just to be clear, you're talking about the new lots to be created and whether they would have side yard or rear yard setbacks?
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
because we end up with that same issue.
If you look at our, it's lot 132, if you can see his plan, we have the same issue, the way our lot is shaped, of whether what we consider our backyard is actually a side line. And it's never been resolved. We just stopped pursuing it.
Okay, great, we will add that to the list.
Thank you.
Okay.
My apologies. I wanted to comment on my original first question with regards to the traffic assessment. It was not necessarily more of a concern of when it was done, but I'm concerned about the accuracy based on when it was done. And I wanted to just get that recorded, please.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, at this point, I think we've covered everyone. Mr. Petropoulos, I've got a pretty good list for you here. I'll just run through them. I'm sure you were taking good notes as well, but the issues I've identified here among the abutters is traffic, specifically, when was the assessment done and sort of determination, how that's determined to be an accurate representation. The future street that's being proposed, would that ultimately egress onto Fife Field as well? Location of sidewalks in particular, are they entirely within the site? Saddleback, would that be a public or a private road? Then we had a few questions about tree cutting and buffering around the different abutting lots, as well as the related issue of the distance between the proposed houses and the existing houses in the abutting lots. A couple of questions about drainage and in particular, who would be responsible if there was an issue with the drainage system. A question about ledge, which I think is really related to whether you anticipate the ledge you've identified being an issue and whether you would have to do any blasting and what the process for that would be. And then the last issue I had was this the newly created lots, would they have, traditional rear setbacks, I guess, or would they have like a corner lot? Are there some corner lots here that would have, multiple side yard setbacks? So I think that's the list I had.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, you took good notes. I took good notes too. And so let me try to respond to each abutter comment in the order that I received them. Ms. Gleason, I believe in the back, was asking for distances regarding property line and trees to remain. There is a 30-foot required setback line along this back property here. No structure can be any closer than 30 feet. 140 is about at 30 feet. 141 is a little further, probably closer to 40 feet. We're representing maintaining of some of the trees along that edge. That is, just not a required. It's not a requirement. It's something that we've suggested to the builder that he does try to propose and maintain any significant trees along this edge. You'll notice, Mr. Chairman, most of our abutters have cleared and built right up to the property line. And we enjoy rights to do the same, but that's not to say that the project doesn't want to be a good neighbor. And so they've established the rear yard setback here, and the hope is to save any significant trees along this back property line. With regard to Mr. Marion at 37 Fifield. So, sir, I'll give you a quick overview of what the city requires for traffic input from an applicant for a project such as this. They have a standard form in which they estimate the number of trips, vehicle trips on a particular project. And I will tell you, this is, in terms of traffic, it's a fairly small project, even though, it's 11 lots, but it's not a shopping mall, it's not an office building, it's not a hospital. And in completing this worksheet, if certain thresholds are exceeded, then further study is needed. I will tell you that's not the case. We're well beneath the threshold. So we estimate trip generations. Right now, they would anticipate during the morning peak hour, let's say 7:30 to 8:30, there'd be 8 vehicles coming out of the project. During the PM peak, there would be maybe 11 vehicles, and that could be in the 4:30 to 5:30 range coming back into the project. Total trips per day is estimated to be about 94 trips or 104 trips per day for the subdivision. And that's how the city of Nashua requires us to take a look at traffic. With regard to the comment about the future street, as I mentioned at the onset, this is probably an underdeveloped property. This is a single family home. It's likely it will be developed. They have asked for a stub to be built to the side lot line. I would, and I don't represent this property owner, but I would guess that they would also have an access to Fifield as well to service their 6 to 8 acres of developable land. Sidewalk, sir. Sidewalk is located on the east side. It is a public sidewalk. It is within the right of way. And Saddleback Road is to be a public way. So if you ever envisioned going out at night and walking through this cul-de-sac and back, that is certainly available to you. It is not a private way. Cecile Carlton brought up a question about stormwater. Ms. Carlton lives right here. Her house is located really up along Wentworth, and she enjoys a wonderful backyard, as does her neighbor here. And currently, this wooded part of the site actually ends up draining towards these two properties and eventually gets into the drainage system in Wentworth and then to Summit and then heads north to Salmon Brook. As I described earlier, when you develop property, you decrease the amount of stormwater moving through soil and permeating through soil. And so we do not want to take that water and add more water to our downstream neighbors. And so, as I mentioned, we're going to collect this. This will be a surface type. You probably are familiar with seeing small stormwater basins. 95% of the time it'll be dry. There is intended to be some trees remaining along the property line, and there could be some additional buffering, likely that the builder would do along that edge just to create a little bit more buffer there. But we control that water, and rather than just dump it back down where it's going now, we think it's better to take it in a pipe down and to put it into the pipe here in this location. So I will tell you that the design did take into consideration these neighbors here to make sure that there wasn't any added stormwater heading in that direction. You raise a good point about the future. If you find a problem, if there's a fall down of a tree or something, who would you contact? And we think if a homeowners association is created for the management and the maintenance of this basin, then that's who would be contacted, and somehow we could figure out a way to get you that name and number once that homeowners association is created. Ms. Whitney speaks here about the similar issues about proximity of the new home to her property line. This property line is a rear yard line to her, but it's essentially a side yard line for this particular lot. As I mentioned, this is the rear, this is the side, this is the side. That house right there is intended to be approximately 20 feet off the edge off that property line. And that is a surveyed line. That line is not in question. Ms. Cadice mentioned similarly here, her location on Summit to the back of lot 144. Less opportunity there because of the depth of this lot. But I would suspect that the developer would look to reestablish some growth and some buffer along this particular property line here. Mr. LaRock spoke of similar comments to Ms. Gleason, distance, how far. Sir, we're respecting that 30-foot back setback in that corner. So the closest corner is 30 feet to the property line. And again, we're showing maintenance of anywhere from 10 to 20 feet of trees in those locations. I can't speak to the exact number, type, or size or condition of those trees, but generally, I think the developer would want to make sure that they were safe, they were good, weren't trees that were going to blow down. But the intent was to create a small buffer along this location here, as well as here along the Whitney property. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that's the list I had. I hope I addressed the questions and the comments that were raised.
Mr. Metropolis, there was one other, and I apologize if I missed it, but I didn't hear you, and that was the ledge question, which is.
Yes, yeah, I missed it too. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I think there is evidence of rock in the neighborhood. We had the good fortune of representing Riviera over the years and in this part of Nashua. So if blasting were to occur, and we think there's a likelihood it could, that is controlled, as we know, here in Nashua by the fire department. It must be a licensed contractor to do any blasting. They must be fully bonded, fully insured. And given the proximity of the homes around the subdivision, it's likely that a pre-blast survey would be warranted, where they would go out before they do anything and take photos and pictures and videos of the supporting projects with permission from these property owners to serve as a baseline record in advance of any blasting, so that if there was an issue, it could be looked back to see what the condition was prior to any work. And that is pretty standard operating for blasting in a project like this.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Metropolis. So, typically, if this were if we were physically located, we would typically limit the feedback at this point to one member of the public. We would ask you to all to get together and sort of collect your comments. Obviously, that's not really feasible in the Zoom format. So I will open it back up to those abutters who previously spoke. I would ask you though to try to limit your comments to any issues that you feel were not just addressed by the applicant during that rebuttal period. So if you do have, what you think is sort of an unanswered question, please go ahead and unmute, and again, just identify yourself, name and address for the record, and happy to take any additional comments you have.
Again, it's Mike Marion, 37 Fifield Street. With regards to that traffic question, I apologize for keep going back to it, but one of the concerns was the amount of traffic that is generated from a pre-COVID timeframe with regards to folks egressing from the college down Fifield Street. There's also I have concerns with regards to children on Montgomery, my own family, as well as Dickerman Street, with regards to the Saddleback properties, the future homeowners egressing and obviously getting down to Main Street to potentially hit highways. So that's part of the traffic concerns, and I don't know if that's actually been addressed or considered, and wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and Mr. Marion, just to, I'll speak to that briefly, and certainly we can have the applicant address it again. But as the applicant indicated, there's a threshold impact review that's done, and that's based on the traffic that would be generated by the project itself. And if the traffic generated by the project is above a certain threshold, that requires a more detailed study. And if it's below the threshold, then it does not require that further study. As the applicant indicated, the anticipated traffic that would be generated by this project would be well under that threshold. And so that's the baseline for for how the traffic impact is determined at that level.
Thank you.
Right. I see, I believe it's Patricia Whitney with your hand up.
Hi, yes, we just didn't hear the response of the side lot question.
Sorry, I think the applicant did identify, but we can ask him to do that again. He had, I think, pointed out which were rear and which were side setbacks, but we can have him show that on the plan again. And I'm sorry,
I appreciate it.
I think you may not. Do you have a visual or no?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
You do. Okay. So maybe, yeah, Mr. Petropoulos, if you want to just identify those again.
Yeah, so I believe the lot in question is 141. This
Yes.
would be we have a front yard setback of 20 feet. We have a side yard of 10, a rear yard of 30. This is the rear yard here. And then we also have a side yard here and a side yard here. The side yard is 10 feet in width. The house is approximately 20 feet away from that corner of that lot line.
So this was what was at debate at City Hall for our land, in that what you're referring to as a side yard, that one that abuts lot 132, is actually a rear line.
It's a rear line for your parcel. You're correct.
No, for yours as well.
They called ours a side. Yeah.
Yeah. We believe this is we believe that we've properly identified this is the rear yard and these is the side yards. This is the front yard.
I don't know how to respectfully say that we would have to disagree with that based on what we were told for ours as well.
Ms. Whitney, maybe after we collect all of the comments, I can also ask the city staff who are on the line in the meeting tonight to address that issue as well, and they can probably confirm Mr. Petropoulos's comments on that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'd just like to get, as long as we're defining them, get ours defined as well.
Sure.
Because it's not clear at all. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Any other questions from the abutters who had spoken previously? Okay. I'm not seeing any. I guess I would just pose that question to staff, Linda, Scott, Matt, if any of you could sort of provide further clarification on that setback issue and how those lines are defined. Again, as Mr. Petropoulos had identified, I think it's the abutting property. He's identified that's a rear yard setback for them, but a side yard setback for the new lot.
Right. So when the plan comes in, it does get reviewed by the zoning manager, and he didn't have any issues with the layout. I would also suggest that perhaps the abutters, if they want to call our office, and we can get clarification for them on the property lines for their property as well. Also, when the applicant goes to build the houses, when they pull a building permit, it will also be reviewed for zoning compliance at that time as well. So it will go through 2 zoning checks. But I would suggest if the applicant would like to call, the abutter would like to call tomorrow, we can get clarification for them on their property lines as well.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Any questions from the board for the applicant at this time? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So at this time, I would go ahead and close the public hearing, and we will go into the public meeting to deliberate the application. And as always, the board does reserve the right to reopen the hearing as necessary. So we obviously heard from a number of abutters with different questions and concerns. I think that the applicant did a good job of responding to those questions, addressing those concerns, and it seems like they were generally satisfactorily addressed for the abutters. In my mind, I don't have any additional questions or concerns at this time, but I would open it up for discussion from the board members. If there are, questions, comments, discussion items. Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Varley. I think I had, well, 2 questions. The first was, I guess I'm still not clear on staff recommendation number 5, where the existing language reads, prior to recording the plan, the existing house shall be removed. I wasn't quite sure if that is an item to be stricken or if there is possible rewording on that. So I'll pose that question. And I did have one follow-up question.
Sure.
I think with regard to the paper street issue, based on the response from the applicant's engineer, I wasn't sure if there was a suggestion that there should be an additional stipulation, number 8, that basically clear title with respect to the paper streets be cleared. I was a little foggy on that, just in terms of if we do decide to make a decision on this case tonight. So I'll put those 2 questions out to the board, and if staff cares to chime in on those, I can't recall if we need to reopen the hearing to let staff chime in, but
No, not to speak to staff, no.
okay, but those are my 2 questions or comments. So thank you, Mr. Varley.
Thank you, Mr. Bollinger. And as to stipulation number 5, yes, I apologize, I didn't address that. I think ultimately what the applicant had said is they were fine with a modified version, but they didn't want it to be, prior to recording the plan. I think what Mr. Petropoulos ultimately suggested is that it could be a stipulation to the effect that the final plan submitted would reflect the relocation of the house, and that would sufficiently address the issue. So it would then identify that the house is being relocated, but not make it a prior recording issue in terms of the exact location. And then on the paper streets issue, yes, I think Mr. Petropoulos there had indicated that they would be happy to have a stipulation, and what I took down in my notes was that something to the effect of prior to recording the plan, releases of private rights to the paper streets would be recorded.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Varley. And one of the reasons I bring that up, and I realize there's only so much that can be controlled by one applicant. Obviously, there's ramifications to the properties to the south of this. We just dealt with a somewhat complicated right-of-way issue on Daniel Webster Highway, where there was literally paper streets strewn all over the place. And again, that's not the fault of any applicant, but just for future considerations, I think when those paper street issues come up, that as best as we have jurisdiction to resolve them, they should be resolved. So thank you, Mr. Varley.
You're welcome. Mr. Sullivan, did you want to speak to that, or
if I may, Mr. Chair, just two brief comments. One, I would respectfully disagree with Mr. Petropoulos as far as condition number 5, and specifically the reason being that in the event that the house is not relocated until after the recording of the plan, the house will become a non-conforming structure in the sense that it crosses multiple lot lines on the proposed subdivision. So our feeling was in drafting that condition that the plan could not in fact be recorded, and that the lot lines therefore not created until that house is relocated. So that was the justification behind having that condition be done pre-recording. So we would respectfully, and maybe worth a conversation with the applicant to resolve this, we would respectfully push for keeping that as a pre-recording condition for that reason, as not to create a non-conforming structure. Relative to addition of a condition number 8, like you, Mr. Chair, I had simply written down releases of all interests, including public and private, in existing paper streets shall be recorded and provided to the city of Nashua prior to plan recording. And I suggest that as a condition number 8 for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Hudson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things I wanted to reinforce and reiterate what Mr. Petropoulos said, in the fact that we've been working with them to address engineering comments. We have another round of comments ready to come out tomorrow, and most of the issues have been addressed. So I think we're in good shape there. We also raised the paper streets question as part of those comments, and I would just ask that we include that stipulation about the contribution to the Main Street corridor fund of $2,200 as a stipulation, and prior to issuance of any building permits.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hudson, for reminding me about that one. Okay. Other questions, comments from the board? And I guess, given Mr. Sullivan's point about stipulation number 5 and in particular the timing of that, I would suggest that we might consider reopening the public hearing for the exclusive purpose of speaking to the applicant about that particular issue and getting their feedback on that. So I don't know if any members are willing to make a motion to that effect, and again, just for that exclusive purpose.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to reopen the public hearing.
And for that limited purpose.
I'm sorry, Mr. Varley. Yes, I'll make that more specific. I'd like to make a motion to reopen the public hearing for the purpose of discussing staff stipulation number 5.
Great, thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Ms. Harper. Any further discussion? Okay, Linda, can we have a roll call vote?
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
And that motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you. So Mr. Petropoulos, obviously you heard Sullivan's comment and his reasoning on the timing for that. And so I wonder if we could maybe just try to get a resolution on that that makes sense, both in terms of the the city's concerns and also the applicants in terms of the timing.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I have a response, to be honest with you. I hadn't thought about, that, time period of when a plan is recorded and those lots become, new lots, and then now you've got a non-conforming house straddling some lots. I always thought that if it were conditioned on a plan or shown on a plan to be relocated to a specific location, then that might carry the day. So it's an interesting question Mr. Sullivan asks. I see my esteemed colleague, Mr. Pernier, has unmuted his line, and that usually means he's ready to say something. So Jerry, what are your thoughts on this condition?
Thank you very much for waking me up. I understand both sides. I understand what Matt's saying, and as he doesn't want to be stuck with a house and 6 buildings are up on other lots and this house doesn't move. So I would make a suggestion to Matt that on the plan that there's a notation that is shown where the house is, that the house is to be relocated prior to the second building permit being issued. If a developer doesn't get his building permits and he can't put up the house, he's certainly going to move whatever he has to do before then. So I understand Matt's concern, and that's why I'm proposing that we put a condition on it, early condition on the development of the project, so that the house is relocated. And it's put right on the plan to begin with before it's recorded. So when it is recorded, everybody has notice.
Mr. Sullivan, your thoughts on that?
I like the creativity. I think I'm amenable to that, provided that it can be upon the first building permit for a new structure on one of the proposed lots. So I'm sensitive to the second building permit, but I think it should be the first building permit for a new structure. And I believe that Attorney Prunier would like to perhaps offer a comment to that.
Only because I said the second one was because we might need the first one to move the house.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I was suggesting, the first new structure to be constructed. I would prefer to be specific about that, because the second permit could be, the second new structure, but I understood. But my recommendation would be the first building permit for a new structure on one of the proposed subdivision lots.
Yeah, we think it's likely the first lot on the right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Usually you don't move those houses very far.
Right.
Okay, so I sense that we have an agreement there in terms of the handling of that. Is that fair to say from the applicant's perspective?
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
for us, yes, yes.
Thank you. Okay, so subject to, are there any questions for the applicant on this issue from the board?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Ballinger.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Varley. I appreciate Mr. Sullivan's specificity on that, because I don't see how you make step one without touching the existing property. So I think as phrased, I think that's the most judicious way to proceed. So I would concur with that recommendation with the language as stipulated.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Mr. Hudson.
I would just question if we should go any further. I mean, should they bond for that house removal or something in the unlikely case that no building permit is issued for a long period of time? I mean, we are left with the issue of a house on a number of lots. So we should have some assurance that it's going to get moved, and perhaps even more than just when the first thing comes along.
If I may, Engineer Hudson, the impetus for us to move it is that it straddles the proposed road, Saddleback Drive. So we really can't build our road with the existing house in the way. That's really the impetus for us to move it. It's probably the first thing that's done out there. And I just got a text that they're thinking first house on the left. I apologize for misspeaking earlier.
Mr. Hudson?
Sure. So further, my I fully understand that, fully expect that will be the impetus to move it. But my concern would be, what if there's some unforeseen condition which leads to this whole project not moving forward? We just create a bunch of lots and we have a house where it shouldn't be. So I don't know what the proper mechanism is. I would just, we bond different, site aspects, and that may be something that we will want bonded or something so that we have assurance that that is going to happen. I mean, I know it's a remote possibility that it wouldn't happen, but that is, it is a concern for the reasons Mr. Sullivan noted.
Mr. Sullivan, do you want to add something to that?
I would add only that I suppose that the stipulation to be considered would be that the applicant shall post a financial security adequate to cover the construction / relocation of the existing dwelling unit to be reviewed by Corporation Counsel and the City of Nashua in advance of the recording of the plan. I think that's the condition should the board choose to proceed in that direction. And I'm sensitive to Engineer Hudson's comment. We've seen stranger things, and certainly we've seen situations like this before, albeit maybe not as extreme. But if the applicant does move quickly, hopefully that security doesn't have to be in place for a long period of time. So I would recommend that as a condition to secure our interests here.
Okay. Okay, I think we have addressed that issue, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing again and move back into the public meeting for consideration of the application by the board. And so I just to summarize where we're at, I think we've got a revision to stipulation number 5, and Matt, just correct me if I get this wrong, but that stipulation number 5 would indicate that the final plan would include a note to the effect that the existing house would be relocated, and that relocation would occur prior to the issuance of the first building permit for a new structure on the newly created lots. So that would be the revision to stipulation number 5. And then I guess either as part of that stipulation or as part of a new stipulation, we would also have a condition that prior to recording of the plan, the applicant would post financial security sufficient to cover the costs associated with relocating the existing residential structure. And then a new stipulation, which I will summarize, but Matt gave a better example of, which is that prior to the recording of the plan, the applicant would obtain releases of all public and private rights with respect to any paper streets, and that those releases would be recorded and provided to the city. And then finally, Mr. Hudson had asked that we also include a stipulation, and again, the applicant had agreed to this, that prior to the building permit, the agreed upon $2,200 traffic impact contribution would be made by the applicant. So that's the summary of what I believe are the revised and additional stipulations. So just for the maker of any motion to have those. Mr. Sullivan.
The only comment I would add, well done, first of all, on all of those notes. The only comment I would add is that the corridor, I believe, is the Main Street corridor. And I just want to be specific about that in the motion. Mr. Hudson, is that correct? Sorry, did I make
Yes,
it?
yes, Mr. Sullivan, that is correct.
Great, thank you.
That is for the $2,200 contribution.
Correct.
Okay. So with all of those comments regarding the various stipulations, is there anyone who's brave enough to make that motion? I'm looking at you, Mr. Vollinger, since you've unmuted.
I laughed. I'm sorry. I understand it, but I don't think I can say it. But I'm going to give it a shot. So I would like to make a motion to approve new business project A21-0048, property located at 36 Fifield Street. Finding that it does meet the requirements of NRO 190-138G, subject to the following conditions. Condition number 1, waiver request shall read is granted, finding that the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Condition number 2 through 4, as stipulated in the staff report. Condition number 5, rewritten to read, final location of existing home to be determined prior to issuance of building permit for the first new lot. Condition number 6 and 7, as stipulated in the staff report. New condition number 8, prior to recording, releases of all public and private rights of paper streets shall be provided to the city. New condition number 9, a $2,200 contribution prior to the issuance of the building permit shall be made to the Main Street Corridor Fund. New condition number 10, prior to the issuance of a building permit, a financial security shall be given by the applicant to ensure the removal of the existing structure. And I'm sure I probably missed a word or two there, but I would like to make that my motion, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Bollinger, can I just ask one thing? I think on that last stipulation regarding the financial security, I believe Mr. Hudson and Mr. Sullivan were suggesting that would be prior to recording of the plan. So I wonder if you're willing to make that adjustment.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to amend proposed condition number 2 that shall occur prior to the issuance. I'm sorry, was it prior to signing or prior to the issuance of the building permit?
Prior to recording the plan.
Oh, I'm sorry, prior to recording. So I will reread it. Proposed condition number 10 shall read, a financial security to ensure removal of the existing structure shall occur prior to the recording of the plan.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Varley.
Thank you, Mr. Bollinger. So Mr. Bollinger has made the motion to approve new business A21-0048 with the 10 stipulations as he indicated. Is there a second to that motion?
Weber, second.
Seconded by Mr. Weber. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Linda, could we have a roll call, please?
Adam Varley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Bollinger.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, we are moving on to new business site plans. So next we have new business site plan, case number A21-0044, Sky Meadow Country Club, Inc. and Meadowbrook Links, Inc. owners, New Meadow Holdings LLC applicant. This is an application and acceptance of proposed site plan amendment to construct a new accessory cart barn building and renovate the cart storage space in the existing clubhouse. Property is located at 4 and 6 Mountain Laurels Drive, Sheet B, lots 2423 and 2422, zoned PRD planned residential development and R40 rural residence, and this is located in Ward 9. As to case A21-0044, is a member of the board willing to make a motion? This application is complete and ready for the board to accept jurisdiction.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Harper?
I would like to make a motion that this application is complete and the board is ready to take jurisdiction.
So motion by Ms. Harper that the application is complete and ready for the board to take jurisdiction. Is there a second to that motion?
Weber, second.
Second by Mr. Weber. Linda, could we have a roll call, please?
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Bollinger,
Yes.
and that motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Whoever's here from the applicant to speak on this application, please go ahead and introduce yourself, name and record. Name and address for the record.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Paul Chisholm. I'm an engineer with Keach Nordstrom Associates. We're located at 10 Commerce Park North, Suite 3 in Bedford, New Hampshire. We are the engineers and surveyors for the project. I am going to share my screen here. So if you could please confirm that that has popped up and you can see the master plan.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So the plan before you tonight proposes to construct a new 4,500 square foot golf cart barn for the Sky Meadow Country Club. As I'm sure most of you know, Sky Meadow is a private club located in South Nashua. The course is situated in a large PRD that sprawls many acres and is surrounded by various types of residential development. The project, however, is really only focused on two areas, which is the clubhouse, this structure right here that I'm circling with my mouse, and then a new cart barn, which will house golf carts, obviously for the course in this structure down here on the southerly parking lot. The golf carts are currently stored in the lower level of the existing clubhouse, kind of back in this area here. And by moving them into a new structure, it's going to free up about just under 5,000 square feet of interior space for renovation for new recreational activities within the clubhouse. And I actually have North Point Construction actually did a nice rendering and building elevations. This is what the new car barn structure is going to look like. So really pretty minor improvements to the existing building. And then this will, again, just be situated down in one of the lower parking lots closest to the first green and the practice tee and the putting green as well. So that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of the project. In addition to the site plan approval, the applicant's also seeking to approve two waivers. The first for existing conditions of the surrounding area. That's that section that requires existing conditions within 1,000 feet of the site. Obviously, these are quite large parcels that extend way down, way off of kind of the area of work, which is really kind of limited to right and through here. And so obviously providing all that information would really not benefit the project in any way. And the second is to provide a lighting plan. This existing parking lot is already well lit. There's a number of existing lights and things like that. Only one of them will be impacted and it's going to be relocated by shifting it over just a few feet. And then the only new lights that are proposed are just security lights and minor low level lighting on and around the building. So We've also had a chance to review the staff report and the proposed conditions there within. We take no exception to any of those. We've addressed conditions from DPW, fire, and various other departments in the city. And I think we're at a point where we're there, or at least very close to being all the way there. So I'm more than happy to continue working with them to finish up any last loose ends. And with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to you folks and answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. Mr. Weber, did you have a question?
I did not. I did not.
Questions from members of the board for the applicant? Okay, seeing none at this time, I would ask members of the public who are in the audience if there's anyone wishing to speak in opposition or concern or with any questions about the project. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and please state your name and address for the record and let us know what your question or comments are. I am not seeing anyone. Linda, are you seeing anyone who?
I am not.
Okay, so not seeing any questions or comments from the public. I'll just give the board members another chance to address any questions they may have to the applicant. Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Barley. It's more of a question for Mr. Hudson, actually. I just I didn't see any stipulation with regard to staff comments or engineering comments. I just wanted to make sure that engineering was satisfied with the application as submitted.
We do have comments, so I need to.
I see
need to get that reference.
Yeah, let me see. We have a stipulation number 5 with comments in an email from Joe Mandola dated March 28th, 2021. Is Dan, is that the right reference?
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I missed that. I meant to state whether or not the date was correct. So thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Okay. Any other questions from the board for the applicant? Okay. Great. Well, that seems good. We're ready to go. So I will close the public hearing and move into the public meeting for the board to deliberate on the plan. And as always, we do reserve the right to reopen the public hearing as necessary. Seems very straightforward. I didn't see any concerns with it. It seems like a pretty basic renovation of the existing building, very little impact. Obviously no questions or concerns from members of the public. Is there anything, any questions or discussion items from the board members? And if there's not, I would happily take a motion on the application.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion
Ms. Harper?
regarding new business project A21-0044 site plan. Owners Meadowbrook Links LLC and Sky Meadow Country Club Inc. With a proposed site plan amendment to NR 1716 to show a new 4,500 square foot golf cart storage building with associated site improvements. Finding that the plan does meet the requirements outlined in site plan NRO 190-146D with 2 waiver requests. The first waiver of 279EE is granted, finding that the waiver will not be contrary, as well as requests for waiver number 2 of 190-88. That is also granted, finding that the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation, and stipulations 3 through 11 as written.
Ms. Harper. So we have a motion from Ms. Harper to approve new business A21-0044 with the 11 stipulations as indicated by Ms. Harper in her motion. Is there a second to that motion?
Weber, second.
Seconded by Mr. Weber. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay. Linda, could we take a roll call, please?
Adam Farley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you. You too. Okay. Next, we have new business site plan, case number A21-0045. Lefevre Folio LLC owner, application and acceptance of proposed amendment to NR 2232 to make minor utility service and landscape revisions. Property is located at 93 Lock Street, sheet 41, lot 63, zoned general industrial, and this is located in Ward 3. As to case number A21-0045, can I have a motion that this application is complete and ready for the board to take jurisdiction?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Harper?
I'd like to make a motion that this application is complete and ready for the board to take jurisdiction.
Thank you. We have that motion by Ms. Harper. Is there a second?
Weber, second.
Seconded by Mr. Weber. Is there any further discussion? Linda, can we have a roll call on that motion?
Adam Farley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Great. Whenever the applicant is ready, if you want to address the application before us.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Tom Zajac. I'm a civil engineer with Hayner Swanson, 3 Congress Street here in Nashua. Just like to share my screen for a second while we're getting going. I'll bring up the plans. Apologize. I thought I'd be faster than my my boss, but about the same speed getting these pulled up. We won't tell him since he's already off the call. Everybody see those okay?
Yes, we can see them.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll be brief. I just have a short presentation. The applicant, Lefevre Folio representatives are on the call. This was a project that was approved back in May of 2019. We received a site plan approval for a 5-unit multifamily project along with associated site improvements. You've been by is currently under construction. Did I lose you guys?
See, we lost the plan. Now it's back. Okay. Can you hear us, Mr. Zajac? Well, we seem to have lost him.
Looks like he's frozen.
Yeah.
Mr. Varley,
Yes.
would you consider moving the continuance motions for both A21-46 and A21-47 to this point on the agenda and just making a motion to continue those formally so we don't need to re-notify to the May 6th, 2021 meeting at 7 p.m. I would request a formal motion to do that just to prevent re-notification.
Sure. And I guess it's just a little unusual because we've opened the hearing on the other one, but
I think you can likely take a motion to close the public hearing and table the application until later in the agenda, and then move on to these next ones until Mr. Zajak's able to join.
sure. Okay. Let's go ahead and do that if someone's willing to make a motion to close the public hearing on A21-0045 momentarily.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing on A21-0045 at 93 Lock Street.
Great. And is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Ms. Harper. Any further discussion? Linda, can we have a roll call on that motion?
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
And that motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now we've closed the public hearing temporarily on A21-0045. And so as Mr. Sullivan indicated, both A21-0046 and A21-0047 had indicated that they wanted to continue their applications to the May 6th planning board meeting. So if I could have a motion on each of those separately, simply to acknowledge and approve the continuance until the May 6th meeting, that would be great.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ballinger?
Thank you, Mr. Varley. I would like to make a motion to continue case number A21-0046 to the May 6th, 2021 Planning Board meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Weber, second.
Second by Mr. Weber. Is there any further discussion? Linda, could we have a roll call on that motion?
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Okay, and then Mr. Ballinger, I don't know if you'd be willing to make the same motion on A21-0047.
Yes, Mr. Varley, thank you. I would like to make a motion to continue case number A21-0047 to the May 6th, 2021 Planning Board hearing.
Great. And do we have a second to that motion?
Weber, second.
Second by Mr. Weber. Any further discussion? Okay, and Linda, can we have a roll on that one as well?
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
The motion passes 5-0.
Great. And I see that we have Mr. Zajac back. And so Mr. Zajac, just because we lost you for a few moments there, we did close the hearing on the application and then moved on so we could continue these other two items. So we will now just take a motion to reopen the public hearing on A21-0045. So if I could get that motion, that would be great.
Mr. Varley.
Mr. Ballinger?
Thank you, Mr. Varley. I would like to make a motion to reopen case A21-0045, property located at 93 Lock Street.
Great. Is there a second to that motion?
Weber, second.
Seconded by Mr. Weber. Any further discussion? Linda, can we get a roll on that one?
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Dan Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Great. And Mr. Zajac, you were up again.
Take two. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I apologize to everybody. You would think after a year of doing these, we would not have these glitches, but here we are. So again, my name is Tom Zajac, civil engineer with Hayner Swanson, 3 Congress Street here in Nashua. Here tonight representing LaFavor Folio LLC. I believe Jess LaFavor is on this call as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions if they do arise. We're here tonight seeking really a waiver request for overhead utilities. As I mentioned, this is a half-acre parcel located in the easterly portion of the city. We did receive site plan approval back in May of 2019. I believe some of the members here tonight were on the board at that time. It's a 5-unit multifamily project. There's a 3-unit building and a 2-unit building. If you've been out there recently, the 2-unit building is up and is partially enclosed, and the foundation to the 3-unit building is in the ground. So the reason we're here tonight is during construction, the construction team encountered asbestos-containing materials on site. This is not, unfortunately, not uncommon for this portion of the city. There's a lot of asbestos fill located in this portion of the city, and that wasn't that unexpected for this site. So the materials are being relocated on site and capped in accordance with an approved ADS work plan under the guidance of NHDES and our environmental team. So we're here tonight seeking really 3 changes to the approved plan, and all are related to really minimizing trenching and disturbance to the existing soils out there and or to the proposed cap material. The first item is a waiver for overhead electric and telecommunications services. Included in our application was a letter dated February 25th, 2021, in which I detail our waiver request from section 190-221. The approved plan back in 2019 included underground utilities. We're now seeking a waiver from that item, as I mentioned, again, to minimize trenching disturbance to the soils on site, along with the associated costs to dispose of those soils or cap them in place. This request, I think, is really in keeping with the neighborhood. If you've been out there, there's overhead poles and services that provide services for the other properties in the area. I'd be happy to answer any further questions on the waiver request if the board does have further questions. The 2 other revisions are related to the approved landscape plan and stormwater design. These are really minor changes, again, related to the asbestos-containing materials. We've substituted a number of plantings with those plantings that have shallow root zones, again, to minimize that impact to the underlying soils, as well as we've shifted one of the subsurface stormwater basins that is part of our overall stormwater design about 20 feet behind the duplex unit. Truthfully, both of these changes, in talking with staff, the landscape plan changes and the stormwater change, given that they are similar design intent, similar results in terms of the stormwater management area. These are really changes that could have been handled administratively, but we figured we're going through the process. We might as well kind of lump those in as well in our review here tonight. So again, I'd be happy to answer any questions. We've reviewed the staff report. All the conditions of approval are acceptable. There was one comment from Joe Mendola from the engineering department related to the exact location of the utility pole. We're in the process of coordinating that exact location with the Eversource rep. Certainly we'll move it on our site if there's no issue, but regardless, I think I'm confident in saying we can resolve any issues with Mr. Mendola and the engineering department if we're able to gain your approval here tonight. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you, very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, did you say you're going to have to move a utility pole?
There will be a new utility pole added as part of this. So previously we had proposed underground utilities to a transformer pad that would then service these 2 buildings. Our revised plans or amended plans show a new utility pole being added within the Lock Street right-of-way along with overhead services directly to the two buildings.
Thank you. Other questions from board members? Mr. Hudson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairs. I just had a question about that pole. Maybe you can clarify, or maybe it still needs to be clarified, but is that pole going to be, inserted on a mid-span of an existing line on the street, or is it solely for service to development?
Mr. Hudson, that's what we're seeking clarification on. It was my understanding that it would just service this development, but I'm seeking clarification on that with Eversource. So we should have an answer on that. And if it is just this development, then we can move that on site and out of the right of way.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none at this time, I would open it up to members of the public that are in attendance. If you have questions, concerns, comments about the plan, please just unmute or raise your hand and then just identify yourself, your name and address for the record, and please go ahead. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone in the public. Linda, you're not?
I don't see anyone with their hand raised on the.
Okay, great. Any additional questions for the applicant before we close the public hearing? Okay. In that case, I will go ahead and close the public hearing, and we will take our deliberations into the public meeting. The board does reserve the right to reopen the public hearing if necessary. So as Mr. Zajac described, I think there are some minor changes to the plan, but essentially what's before us is the waiver request with respect to the underground utilities. It sounds to me like there's a reasonable basis for asking for the waiver now, given the asbestos on the property, and as the applicant indicated, there is overhead throughout this neighborhood elsewhere, so it is consistent with the surrounding uses. So it seems like a reasonable request under the circumstances, but I'm certainly happy to open it up and hear comments from others or discuss that further. Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in all honesty, I hesitated to bring this up because I have no real issues at all whatsoever with the application. As we're receiving all electronic submittals now or packages, the orientation of the north arrow caught me off guard on this one. And I realize Mr. Zajac does not need to respond to this. There are limitations with the software, and I understand that, but when north is facing down, we don't have the ability to flip our paper anymore. So I'll leave it at that. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bollinger. Any other questions or points of discussion from board members? Mr. Hudson?
Yeah, I brought up the poll question only, in that I was hoping to remove the one minor comment that engineering has, but we are still clarifying that, so that's fine. It is very minor in nature. We have no issues with this.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else? And if there are no other questions or comments, happy to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Harper?
I'd like to make a motion Regarding new business project A21-0045, site plan amendment to NR 2248 located at 93 Lock Street. Finding that the plan does meet the requirements outlined in the subdivision NRO 190-138G. Number one as written. Number two, the only request for waiver of 190-221 is granted, finding that the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation, and 3 and 4 as written.
Thank you, Ms. Harper. Ms. Harper's made a motion to approve new business A21-0045 with the 4 stipulations indicated. Is there a second to that motion?
Weber, second.
Second by Mr. Weber. Is there any further discussion? Okay, Linda, can we get a roll call on that motion?
Adam Farley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Ian Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Bollinger,
Yes.
and that motion passes 5-0.
Great. Thanks. Okay, so we have previously addressed A21-0046 and A21-0047, both having been continued to the May 6th, 2021 meeting. So then up next is new business site plan, case number A20-0189, Palms Edge LLC owner. Application and acceptance of proposed site plan and consolidation plan to construct 18 units and 2 buildings along with associated site improvements. Property is located at 137 in L Palm and L Pine Street. Sheet 99, lots 31, 35, and 69. This is zoned urban residence and is located in Ward 6. As to case number A20-0189, could I have a motion that this application is complete and ready for the board to accept jurisdiction?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Mr. Bollinger to accept jurisdiction. Is there a second?
Weber, second.
Second by Mr. Weber. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Okay, Linda, can we get a roll call?
Adam Farley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Ian Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Bollinger.
Yes.
And that motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you. And is there someone here from the applicant speaking on this case?
Yes, Richard Maynard is here.
Hi, Mr. Maynard.
Can somebody post? Hi, can somebody post drawing number 4 from the set? Is that possible?
I don't know.
It'll take me a minute if I can.
Anyway, let me finish my introduction. This is Richard Maynard, professional engineer with Maynard and Parkhead Engineering of 31 Kunza Street, Nashua, here to represent the Corvo family and the Palms Edge project on Palm Street. The last time Engineer Hudson helped out with that, but that's all right. Am I still being heard?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. I think Linda was just looking to see if she could locate that document of the plan.
I have to just pass the hosting duties over to Matt so I can minimize my go off the screen. So
I keep getting a notice on the screen that says my internet connection is unstable. So anyway, bear with me.
Doing okay, Linda?
yeah, I'm just trying to find it.
Okay. Okay.
Drawing number 4, Linda, please. The busy one.
right, let's see. Can you see that?
I can see the note. Yep.
All right, page 4.
That's drawing 1. Can you go to 4? Good. Thank you.
Can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right. Palm's Edge is a multifamily project at the southern dead end of Palm Street, where there are several existing issues. Palm Street is a dead-end street with no place for city vehicles and other large trucks to turn around. As a consequence, these large trucks, such as fires, trash, snowmobiles, plows, etc., need to turn around on private property, thus beating the heck out of all the private driveways and pavement and parking areas. In the winter, there is no place to plow snow. Emergency vehicles have only one way into the portion of the Palm Street and have a very difficult time getting back out. Our solution is multifaceted. The first part of it was to discontinue the southern end of Palm Street and create a public access way along the old railroad bed to Ash Street. That discontinuance has been approved by the alderman several months ago. We were also granted a minor density variance by the ZBA to construct 2 buildings, one a 12-unit building and the second a 6-unit building, multifamily building. Along with the access to Ash Street along the old railroad right of way, the project also provides areas for snow storage, plus some 20 extra parking spaces to serve this portion of Palm Street, the Palm Street neighborhood, where parking is currently severely limited. Topography in this area is essentially flat. Drainage is primarily handled by, and proposed to be handled on this project by leaching catch basins and perforated pipes into the ground. The pipelines existing in Pond Street and Ash Street are combined sewers, and we don't want to contribute any more particular sewers. Therefore, it's all going to be handled on site and infiltrated. Green space is somewhat limited to the drainage, parking, and snow storage needs. However, as shown on drawing number 2, we will be providing several new trees with regard to landscaping. Many of the areas need to be left open so that we can have access ways or provide areas for snow to be plowed. Several waivers are involved with this project. Additional parking, 50 spaces versus 27 spaces required are shown on the plan. With 18 units of multifamily, this would at 2 spaces per unit, which is more typical for multifamily. This would leave 14 spaces surplus to serve the rest of this Palm Street neighborhood, where there's a severe limited of available parking on site on the individual properties. They could therefore come down here and rent some of these properties and relieve it, because it's also not a good street to have overnight parking on street. Underground utilities in this established neighborhood, overhead utilities are the norm. Existing conditions, we pretty much get everything that's relevant to this particular project in this on these plans. Therefore, we ask for a waiver of the conditions within 1,000 feet. Parking spaces are shown at 18 feet deep, so as to allow 2-way traffic, drive hours of 20 foot, especially on the access way over to Ash Street, so that we have 20 feet and have 2-way traffic for the the general public and various vehicles and emergencies. So no new lighting is proposed. This is an existing neighborhood and more than sufficient lighting. Drive aisle into the easterly parking area to the left on your plan is shown as 14 feet, whereas site distance is optimal and traffic would be minimal. And so the 14 feet allows us to access these parking spaces to the left of the site. The consolidation plan mentioned in the staff steps essentially documents the street discontinuance and the access way to Ash Street. There will be a recorded access easement document that goes along to allow access 24-foot aisle to Ash Street for the general public and other particular vehicles. Stipulation number 10 engineering has been satisfied according to the emails dated March 25th and 26th, that engineering is satisfied and is only waiting for the legal department to sign off on the access easement. The legal department doesn't tend to answer to developers, but I think they've assured planning department that everything's in order with the access easement, and that will get recorded with the plan. Stipulations 11 through 18 are fairly standard and self-explanatory, and the applicant has no problem with those. Thank you. I missed something here. I didn't talk about the waivers, excuse me. Bear with me, please. All right. Some other waivers were underground utilities I talked to about parking spaces. Some of the parking spaces are shown as 18 feet deep to allow two-way drive aisles of 24 feet, especially for the access way to Ash Street. Also, we need a little bit of green space alongside the pavement to allow snow to be plowed to. It's a major problem in this neighborhood that there's no place to put snow, and this plan will allow 2 snow storage areas plus the ability to get the snow out of Palm Street and free up the entire area. So that pretty much is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. And I apologize to the extent that you may have addressed this, but you were breaking up a little bit at a couple different points there. So could you maybe just go back over the access easements and just maybe describe those in a bit more detail? So I gather that there would be, you're saying that there'd be public access between where we have the parking spaces that then where there's a connection to Ash Street, and there would be easements across that access and going to Palm Street. Is that what you were referring to?
Correct. We come down to the end of Palm Street to the discontinuance line, and we continue forward, turn left, and go towards Ash Street. That area in the old railroad right-of-way is private property. It's part of our site plan. However, to alleviate a lot of problems on Pond Street, snow plowing, emergency access, regular access, we agreed to provide an access easement for the general public so that it can go from the end of Pond Street down the old railroad right-of-way in the 24-foot parking lot drive out to Ash Street. This allows better access for emergency vehicles. It allows large vehicles, et cetera, to get out of Palm Street without having to turn around somebody's private property. So, and that is a recordable document that'll be recorded at the same time as the site plan. Thank you.
And just in reference to the access, there's no access between or proposed between this project lot and the abutting commercial lot. Is that correct?
Correct. There's a change of grade there, plus there's a very sturdy post and cable fence in there and everything. So, and we didn't negotiate anything with them to get into the parking lot. So that's a multi-tenant commercial property, and they have more than adequate access to public streets, and we don't need them to come into this residential particular area with traffic and things like that. We're trying to upgrade this end of Palm Street and give good access, but minimize the amount of traffic that keeps going through this neighborhood. So, thank you.
Okay. Other questions from board members? And Linda, sorry, do you mind just dropping the plan just for a moment, just so I can see everyone?
There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, so questions for Mr. Maynard from the board? Mr. Hudson?
Not a question per se, but I did want to reference that public easement. That was a request we made at the time of discontinuance. because we do have trouble turning trucks around down there, plow trucks, solid waste trucks and that sort of thing. So that was agreeable, and that's proceeded forward to, I think, conclusion here. So that we appreciate that, and that's going to make life easier for everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
If I may comment, it also makes it easier for the applicant because we don't need all those large trucks turning around in our neighborhoods, in our parking lots and our paved areas and beating the hell out of them. So it's beneficial to both the city and this developer.
Ms. Harper and then Mr. Bollinger.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of concerns that perhaps you could address, Mr. Maynard. I am trying to picture, how snow removal is going to look on this site and where, plows are actually going to be able to, push some of the snow, as well as the snow that's probably going to be pushed down Palm Street, possibly by the city. And I mean, do you have any concerns about there really being enough room for parking and for snow storage?
I always have concerns because you never know how much snow we're going to get at any one time. But right now, it's miserable. There is absolutely no place to put snow on Palm Street. It causes a major problem. And if you heard an engineer Hudson say to you, they're very appreciative of the ability to push the snow down to the 2 snow storage areas that are identified on the plan. I would think that will handle most of the snow, most of the problem. It won't necessarily handle every one, but it's substantially better than what it is now. Last winter was a big problem with all the snow we had at certain times. So this is an improvement, significant improvement. It may not cure everything, but it's much better than we've had historically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. And then my other quick question, and it may be on the plan, but I honestly can't see some of the words on here. It's just about traffic control. I do picture, there being some traffic perhaps cutting through here, and just the safety of possible pedestrians going from their vehicles to their building and what have you. Are there any plans for speed bumps or?
Speed bumps aren't particularly legal on public roads because they're a hazard. That you only can do those on private property. I can't see people speeding through here. There's some turns. They're going through a parking lot, essentially, and things like that. So, as with anything, people do try to speed, but I see there very little opportunity in this regard to do a lot of speeding through this access way, this access way easement. And it's there mainly for large vehicles, trucks, city vehicles, things like that. So. There's only about 12 homes maybe on Palm Street that would potentially be using this in and out. So I think traffic will tend to be minimal.
So there's no like signage or anything of that nature proposed?
Well, we hadn't put any up.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I'm not sure how many people would pay attention to a sign that's going slow, but whatever. In this particular neighborhood, especially.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Maynard.
Mr. Bollinger, did you have a question?
Mr. Verley, no, I'm sorry, I unmuted by accident, but thank you for the recognition. No questions.
Other questions from the board at this time? Okay. Given that there are no other questions from the board at the moment, I will put it out to the members of the public who are attending the meeting. Again, as you've heard from prior cases, if you do have questions, comments, concerns regarding the plan, you could either raise your hand or just unmute yourself. Please give your name and address for the record, and go ahead and ask your questions or provide your comments, please. I'm not seeing anyone's hand up and not seeing anyone on mute. So I'll just put it out there one last time, make sure that there's no one from the public who's interested in speaking on this plan. Okay. Are there any additional questions from the board of the applicant at this point? Okay. All right. Barring that, then I will go ahead and close the public hearing on this application, and we will take our deliberations into the public meeting. And again, with reserving the right to reopen the public hearing as necessary. We've got the plan before us as Mr. Maynard has described. The units themselves seem pretty straightforward in terms of the proposed construction, and it does sound like the sort of parking access improvements will obviously, Mr. Maynard said, be valuable for the developer, but it seems like valuable to the city as well in terms of both creating additional snow storage and allowing better access for city vehicles. Obviously, we did not hear any comments or concerns from the public, but happy to tackle any issues or any questions that any board members want to raise. And apart from that, I would just note that we do have a number of waiver requests. I think Mr. Maynard generally addressed them, and I don't believe we've heard any concerns about any of those. But I just wanted to note that we've got 7 different waiver requests here that relate to parking, landscaping, underground utilities, and a lighting plan. Okay, well, if there are no questions, concerns, items of discussions, certainly happy to take a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve case number 820-0189, property located at 137 and L Palm Street and L Pine Street, finding that it does meet the requirements of NRO 190-146D, subject to the following conditions as stipulated in the staff report. Condition 1, with regard to waiver, shall read is granted and will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation 2 shall read the waiver will not be contrary. Excuse me, is granted and will not be contrary. Stipulation number 3 shall read is granted and will not be contrary. Stipulation number 4 is granted and will not be contrary. Stipulation number 5 is granted and will not be contrary. Stipulation number 6 is granted and will not be contrary. Stipulation 7 is granted and will not be contrary. Stipulations 8 through 18 as stipulated in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ballinger. So we have a motion from Mr. Ballinger to approve case number A20-0189 with the 18 stipulations indicated by Mr. Ballinger in his motion. Is there a second on that motion?
Second, Weber.
seconded by Mr. Weber. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, Linda, can we get a roll call on that motion?
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Ian Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Okay, we are moving on to other business. Other business item 1 is review of the tentative agenda to determine proposals of regional impact. I don't know if anyone has had a chance to review the tentative agenda and would like to make a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ballinger?
Thank you, Mr. Varley. I'd like to make a motion that there are no projects of regional impact per the agenda.
Thank you. So motion by Mr. Ballinger that there are no proposals of regional impact. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Weber. Is there any further discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Ballinger?
Thank you, Mr. Varley. Just with respect to the landing project, I do have two questions. One, Mr. Sullivan was kind enough to put forth a couple of possible dates for a site walk, and I didn't know if he had any input on whether or not those dates had been shored up. My second question could probably be addressed by Mr. Hudson. It looks like, I believe there's going to be a special meeting on the 22nd. And at some point in the past, Mr. Hudson had discussed the possibility of bringing in an outside consultant to review this application. And I guess before we get together on the 22nd, I would like to know whether or not the outside consultant, if that's still the plan, if they've been retained, and whether or not they're going to be present for special meetings, regular meetings, and for the site walk. Thank you, Mr. Varley.
And Mr. Ballinger, just as a point of clarification, because we've got the motion, the second on the no proposals of regional impact, are your questions relate to whether there's a regional impact in that project, or are they independent of that?
Mr. Varley, yes, thank you. It is independent of that, but I wasn't sure, honestly, of the proper time to address those questions. So I didn't know if it would be during discussion on this, since this project was listed on regional impact, or if staff wanted to address this project separately in some manner. So I will defer to the protocol of the board. But yeah, I still stand by the original motion that there are no projects of regional impact.
Okay, in that case, if Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Hudson agree, I think I would suggest that we complete the motion on regional impact if these issues are raised in that connection, and then we can have them answer both of those questions you've raised.
Question.
Mr. Weber?
Yes, I think we discussed that that project was regional impact, and that previous meeting that it was, the landing is going to be regional impact because it's abutting the Merrimack, and that abuts other cities and things. So, and they were gonna, I think that Matt said he was gonna look into that anyway already.
Okay, I actually thought we had come to the opposite conclusion, that although it did abut the Merrimack River, that in and of itself typically would not constitute a regional impact. And maybe that if you want to confirm or deny my recollection there, but I thought that's where we'd come out on that.
That was my recollection as well, Mr. Chair, that the board decided, despite the proximity to the abutting community, the scale of the proposed development alone did not trigger determination of regional impact. And at that time, the board requested further information on the criteria for determining whether a regional impact exists, and that was the reason for sending the informational email after the meeting. But I don't believe that determination was made for this specific set of projects.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just to summarize again, we have a motion that was made by Mr. Bollinger that there are no proposals of regional impact, seconded by Mr. Weber. And so absent further discussion, I would suggest we take a roll vote on that. And then again, we can have Mr. Hudson and Mr. Sullivan then address Mr. Bollinger's questions. So Linda, if you want to go ahead with the roll call.
Adam Varley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Ian Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Bollinger.
Yes.
And that motion passes 5-0.
Okay. And so now before we take up the next other business item, then maybe we can talk about the two questions that Bob had raised.
Sure. Happy to do that, Mr. Chair. So thank you everyone for the responses on both the attendance at the April 22nd, that what I'll call a special meeting, and also the sidewalks. We actually had unanimous agreement from all who responded that they were available on April 22nd, which is technically a normal meeting date, but not normal in the context of the board's bylaws. So we are planning to proceed with a special meeting on the 22nd dedicated to the 3 Nashua landing projects, one being the subdivision and the other 2 being 2 site plan projects for that meeting alone. Additionally, we sort of had preemptively considered a site walk, particularly because this project will not be a sort of one and done, if you will, at that April 22nd meeting. We anticipate there'll be, if not 1, potentially 2 or 3 subsequent meetings where the engineering team will have to bring back reviews of the revisions to the application based on the board and public comment. So we had intended to schedule a site walk for the planning board, albeit a bit odd. We felt because of the scale of the project that it might be appropriate. Everyone indicated that the 3rd or 4th would work at 5:30 p.m. So I actually wanted to get sort of a straw poll from the board this evening. If you have any preference on those 2 times, those are Monday and Tuesday evenings. I'm happy to sort of not set that formally this evening because I think it's best to have the April 22nd meeting, but at least calendar it for all of us preemptively if that would be acceptable. So again, that's the 3rd and the 4th at 5:30 p.m. for site walk at the Nashua landing site. I'm not sure if everyone has a preference as to those 2 times and dates.
I would say not for me either one.
Okay. Does anyone have any concern about Monday or Tuesday evening? Okay. No. I would suggest then that we plan on Tuesday the 4th at 5:30 p.m. And again, I wouldn't consider this formally scheduling. I think we'll set it at the 22nd meeting, but please just keep that in your calendars, and I'll try to send a follow-up email so that everybody has that on their calendars for that evening. But please do remember as well, there'll be a meeting on the 22nd, and we'll of course get a full package out to you in advance of that meeting as well. And Mr. Chair, I'm happy to address the second question unless Mr. Hudson would like to, but probably best, I think that's a resounding no from Mr. Hudson. We are contracting for third-party engineering services for the landing project, albeit it's been an arduous process to actually get that review contract in place, Mr. Bollinger, to your question. But as we speak tonight, not that I would ever multitask during a meeting, but I may be sort of tying a bow on some of getting that review contract in place. We will be using Hoyle Tanner as the reviewing party for both stormwater and traffic. They will turn around to review in a period of 2 weeks. So we are not confident that we'll have all review comments in hand for the meeting on the 22nd, but we have asked Hoyle Tanner to be in attendance at that meeting to listen to the testimony and the testimony from the public and the board. And then we have asked them to be at least 1 subsequent planning board meeting as well to answer questions about their findings and address the board. And I'm sure that there will be a possibility for amending that contract if necessary, if their presence is needed at additional meetings to discuss things with the board, the applicant and the public. But again, we do intend to do third party. We're in the process of getting that set up, and they will be representing the city and our interests in the project. Dan, would you add anything to that?
Only that the arduous nature of getting it done has nothing to do with Hoyle Tanner or the applicant. It's entirely to do with, how we manage our funding in this sort of scenario. It's kind of Matt and I are still fairly new, and we found that to be interesting, that it wasn't a quick and easy mechanism to make it happen, but we found a way.
Question.
Mr. Weber?
Yes. Is the Army Corps of Engineers, how heavily are they part of this situation?
Mr. Hudson can correct me, but I don't believe they're involved at all in this project. There's no direct riverfront impact as a result of this, other than some stormwater discharge. But Mr. Hudson, am I correct on that? No
I think
specific
that's
disturbance.
correct. There may be some
proposed?
wetland impacts that they need to address through the permitting, and Army Corps has some, ability to comment on those sorts of things. But I'd agree with you. It's nothing directly related to the city's review or permitting of any of those features. It'd be more related to their, DES permitting through the alteration of terrain and wetlands permitting.
Yeah, only reason I brought that up is because of the other projects next to the bridge,
The Renaissance projects.
Thank
Yes,
you.
absolutely. Yep. And there is a substantial DES component to this, not only for the alteration of terrain, but also the wetlands permitting and based on the environmental conditions on the site, of course, and the activity use restriction. DES is heavily involved in how this project is proceeding.
Good luck.
Good luck to you. You are the ones who will make the decision ultimately. So
They're the one that does the homework.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Ballinger, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Varley. Thank you for the clarification on the outside consultant. I'm well aware of the proclivities involved in government contracting, so I understand that. My whole point, what I was going towards, is whether or not we have the 422 meeting without the outside consultant there. But if it's already been determined that they're going to be present, then that's okay. And Matt just wished us good luck, so I'll wish good luck back to him with finalizing your contract. So that was my whole point. I didn't know if it was worth going through that effort of the special meeting if we weren't going to have that outside counsel available. So thank you for the clarification on that.
And just a quick comment, if I may, Mr. Chair. The reason we'd like to have them there, even if we don't have their review comments in hand, Mr. Ballinger, is just to have them hear the testimony of the board. I think we'd like to give them sort of the same work from the same baseline as everybody on the project. And just before, I have to say this too, I just want to thank Scott McPhee in our office, who's done a tremendous job of doing, I'm not doing a lot of the homework, Scott is. He's done a tremendous job reviewing these applications and getting this thing headed in the right direction. So he's really going to be the technical expert. Not to add pressure to Scott, but he's going to be a technical expert as this application comes in front of the board. So I just want to thank him for all of his hard work. So when it comes to you, when it's in good shape, you can thank him for that. So thank you.
Mr. Varley, if I could ask one quick follow-up.
Yeah, sure, Mr. Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Varley. Just, I guess to kind of complete the circuit here, has that applicant submitted all of their materials? Because obviously, I think we're expected to take jurisdiction on 422. So I'm trying to figure out if they've actually made their submission, and if we're going to receive a recommendation prior to the meeting that we should accept jurisdiction. Because if they're still in a very preliminary phase, I might have concerns about accepting jurisdiction, because obviously the clock starts running. So if we're going to talk about very conceptual, ideas, that's one thing, and I don't mind having that discussion. But if we were to accept jurisdiction, I would think that they've got a pretty substantial plan set and other associated documentation to go with that.
Yes, they have submitted all required documents, Mr. Bollinger. We've been going through sort of an iterative process to refine some of those documents, but they actually submitted, I would call, a complete application with the exception of a few waiver letters and standardized plan notes about a month and a half ago. It's just been a process of making sure that they have everything that we would normally require. The only thing that's outstanding at this point in time, quite frankly, is some modifications to elevations for the structures. And there is some sort of discussion happening about whether waivers are needed in some specific cases for the project. But other than that, you'll be delivered. Be careful what you ask for. You'll be delivered with a substantial application package for that April 22nd meeting. They have provided, in my opinion, what will be a complete application by the time of that hearing. And we will likely recommend the application for accepting jurisdiction at that time. I just don't want to say 100%, but I'm feeling 98% there as of this point in time.
Thank you for the feedback. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so we do have one other business item. So we have a other business number 2, which is a referral from the Board of Aldermen on proposed R-21-124, approving a 5th amendment to purchase and sale of city land at 21 Pine Street, map 77, lot 17, in land of Public Service Company of New Hampshire, DBA Eversource Energy at 3 Pine Street Extension, map 77, lot 2A. And Matt, I don't know who we have speaking to this evening.
I know we have a few folks on, I believe, from Eversource directly. I'm happy to make a couple quick remarks, but I would pass it off to them first, actually, if they'd like to. But certainly they can just defer to me if they're more comfortable with that. You will see that they provided a sort of a fact sheet about the project and the referral item. And I would point, just before Eversource would like to maybe say a few words, I would point to the sort of whereas language in the resolution, which really, I think, delineates quite nicely what the modifications are. The board has actually seen some elements of this resolution in the past through the lot line relocation and this resolution itself, but functionally what this does is it extends the amount of time for the resolution. It also provides some specific fee concessions for cleanup on the city lot. And also it does make some changes to the easements as well, but I'd be happy to give some time to Eversource if they'd like to say any additional words about this specific resolution. But if not, I'm happy to answer questions and just sort of go through some bullet points of what's being done here as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matt.
So, hi, my name is Sarah Hoodlet. I'm with Eversource. I do public involvement for the project. And I just wanted to, I know in the interest of time, it's late, but we do have, if you are interested, we have a PowerPoint presentation that we can just breeze through if you want. Otherwise, the project one-pager that Mr. Sullivan related to earlier pretty much gives a good high-level overview of the project, but I'm happy to run through a PowerPoint if you think that would be helpful for the board.
Sure. Yeah. If you wouldn't mind, and as you said, I mean, we could certainly go through that quickly, and then if if there are questions from the board, we can address those.
Sure. And before I get started, I do just want to say there are a few other people here with me tonight. So if you have questions throughout, feel free to answer those, and one of my colleagues might be able to answer that. But for now, I'll go through this briefly, and we'll get started. So, do I have the ability to share my screen? Yes. Okay. I'll see my screen.
No.
No.
Not yet.
Okay. Let me see. Oh, I have to hit share. There we go. All right. Can you see it now?
Just, yep, now we can see it.
Perfect. All right. Apologies. So, as we mentioned, this is the Nashua Mill Yard substation. So we are rebuilding the substation, and this is just a brief update on the project. So I will just breeze through this. So this is a general location of where the substation is. It's located off of Technology Way in Nashua. It's near the Nashua River and a handful of business parks in the downtown area. This is recently updated, so I'm sure you are familiar with the area. So this distribution substation was built in 1954 and originally served to supply power to new businesses and industries moving to the Mill Yard area. Today, 70 years later, the substation feeds more than 2,000 customers using outdated infrastructure that is now obsolete. The substation has served the area well, but it has reached the end of its life and does need to be entirely rebuilt. So in summary, the new substation will be built on property adjacent to the existing substation, as you can see in this slide. Eversource has been working with the city on finalizing a land swap with the intent of providing the city with a larger parcel of land for future development. In addition, as Mr. Sullivan said, there is some environmental remediation that needs to take place on both properties, and Eversource has offered to cover the cost of those as well. Once complete, the new substation will meet current standards and have entirely new infrastructure in it, including foundations, fencing, transformers, and all the other pieces that come along with the substation. So I won't read through all this, but just some of the quick benefits of the project. The land swap was first discussed in 2014, but like I said, with the intent to provide the city with a larger piece of power property for future development. We have acquired new easements since those original conversations to accommodate this rebuild. Additionally, environmental remediation is going to happen, which will be paid for by Eversource and over discussion with the city. Once constructed, the new substation will be in place and the old substation will be deconstructed. The land will be restored and the property will transfer ownership from Eversource to the city. The new substation will better support residents and businesses in the future, and the electric system will be made more reliable by the investments that are made to the area. Really quick high-level schedule here. So we've been working on this project for a while, and over the last 6 months or so, we've really been finalizing the scope and the engineering while simultaneously performing real estate activities associated with getting easements, finalizing language and all that. We anticipate starting remediation efforts this spring with site preparation for the new substation site starting shortly thereafter. Construction of the new substation would take about a year and would start later this year, of course, and going through the first half of 2022. Once the new substation is complete, like I mentioned, we deconstruct the old substation and restore the site before transferring ownership to the city. Of course, the schedule is subject to change based on weather and a whole variety of things, but this is a general high-level schedule for you. To property owners nearby and as well as the city. We send letters, we'll have field staff on site to answer questions. We'll have a website once we have the project going. That'll be a good resource for the town or the city as well as property owners and businesses nearby. And we have a project hotline email address that people can contact us at. And I'm the one that would respond to those questions that come in. And then just for the city's reference, this is just general contact information. Myself, Sarah Hoodlet, Project Outreach, Community Relations is Elizabeth LaRocca, who's also on the call with us today. I'm sure you're very familiar with her. And then Walter Quinn, who's also on the call, is the project manager for the project. And then we have the hotline and email and phone number for people that want to call us with any questions or comments or concerns about the project. Just want a general update on the project. And that's really it. I did want to let you know again that we do have people here that could answer any questions about any easements or anything like that. But that's really a high level update on the project for you.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And then Matt, just to connect that back to the resolutions before us, then effectively, given everything that Sarah just described in terms of the progress of the project, it sounds like the resolution is basically just to create additional time to complete those remaining steps to allow the completion of the project.
That is correct. Functionally, that is it. I mean, there are a few other pieces to it that are outlined in the materials, but that is functionally what we're doing here. Yes, it's a time extension.
Questions from the board for either Matt or Sarah or others from Eversource? Okay, well, as Sarah and Matt both suggested, it's probably, we've had this project before us before, and I think, everyone here is probably has some familiarity with it. And again, it sounds like, as Matt said, at least, functionally, this is largely just, providing an extension for completion of the project. So I'd certainly, be in favor of making a favorable recommendation here. So if there are no questions or concerns, I would certainly open it up and ask to see if anyone's willing to make a motion as to the ordinance before us.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Harper?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to make a favorable referral to the Board of Aldermen regarding Resolution R-21-124.
Great, thank you. So we have that motion from Ms. Harper to make a favorable recommendation on Resolution R-21-124. Is there a second to that motion?
Second. Waiver.
Any further discussion? Okay, can we get a roll call on that, Linda?
Evan Barley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Ian Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience waiting to the very end there.
No problem. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Okay, so that concludes the regular agenda. I don't know if there are any other discussion items. Obviously, we spent a bit of time talking about the upcoming meeting and the landing project. So I don't know if there was anything else that anyone wanted to add or had questions about. And if not, I would be happy to take a motion to adjourn.
I can do that.
Mr. Weber.
Make a motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Great. So motion by Mr. Weber to adjourn. Linda, could we please have a roll on that one?
Adam Barley,
Yes.
Maggie Harper,
Yes.
Ian Hudson,
Yes.
Ed Weber,
Yes.
Bob Ballinger.
Yes.
And the motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you. And we are adjourned at 10:13.